Our topic tonight has to do with the observance of Tishah B'Av. And Tishah B'Av just literally means the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, right? So if you look on your calendars, you'll see we're in the month of Av, and we're now at the 9th day. And the 9th, so like in the United States, if we say July 4th, right, we know we're not just referring to the day after July 3rd, right? We're talking about a specific event. We're talking about the United States' Independence Day. And so the same with this occasion. It's just referred to by the day of the month of the year that it took place on and commemorates. But it has to do with a specific fast. It's mentioned in the book of Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19. This is what the Lord Almighty says: the fasts of the 4th, 5th, 7th, and 10th months will become joyful and glad occasions and happy festivals for Judah. Therefore, love truth and peace. So it mentions these 4 specific fasts. The 5th month one is the one that we're talking about right now. The month of Av is the 5th month. And so even in Zechariah's day, we see that they were tracking months the same way that we track months today in the Hebrew calendar. Not exactly the way that Moses had it with starting with Passover, but here they're tracking it the same way that we do with the month of Tishri. So the 5th month is this fast that it's talking about, so it's a fast day. But God's promising that even though it's a fast day, He's going to one day change it from a fast to change it to a day that is joyful and glad and with a happy festival. Right? And so, therefore, in the present time, love, truth, and peace. And so what is commemorated on this day and memorialized on this day is the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar that took place in 586 BCE, and he destroyed it on Tishah B'Av. He destroyed it on the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av. And so 70 years later, we were able to go back under Cyrus and the Persians and be able to rebuild the temple under the hand of Nehemiah and Ezra. And later on, many years later, Herod comes along and he remodels the temple, and it becomes known as Herod's temple, or the Second Temple. And so we have that. And then a few years after that, in 70 AD, it is destroyed again, this time by the Romans, and it's destroyed also on the 9th day of Av, on Tishah B'Av. And that's kind of, significant, I think. If you had a house and it burned to the ground, and then 20 years, so you rebuilt it, and then 20 years later, you have another fire, and it's on the same exact day of the first one, that would be kind of unique, right? That would be, it's a coincidence, right? So I believe that God had ordained it that way. I don't think the Romans planned it that way, but to get our attention and to remind us that it's only God's hand and God's blessings as we continue to follow Him, that we have His protection over us. Otherwise, we're just open for the devil's attack upon us. And so it's still commemorated today with fastings and remembrance of the temple and God's destruction of it. Now, there are several other events that took place also on Tisha B'Av. We go to about 1,000 years later, and the First Crusade began, and when thousands of Jewish people were slaughtered by the Crusaders, and also the First Crusade started on Tisha B'Av in the year 1096. And you can see in this woodcut that some of the things, the atrocities that took place during the Dark Ages. Here's a young boy, a Jewish boy with a yarmulke on, and he's got his jacket or shirt rolled down on him, so his neck is exposed, and a soldier there with a sword drawn, and he's being forced to kneel in front of a nun who's holding a crucifix, and he's being told to pay homage and pray to this image, and or he's going to get his head cut off. And then in the background, you see a man who obviously didn't obey or whatever, didn't accept the forced conversion, and he's being hoisted up on a pole and on a wheel. He's tied to this wheel for the sun to just bake him and the birds to pluck out his eyes and peck away at him until he's dead and eaten by the vultures. And so horrible cruelties, just one image of just the horrible cruelties, and they exalted it and had paintings and woodcuts depicting these horrible atrocities that they did with no shame. and as a method of instilling fear. And so that, again, First Crusade also taking place. Then about 200 years after that, England, under King Edward I, expelled us out of England. We're no longer allowed at that time to live in England at all. You know, you get an expulsion notice, your whole family and nationality, race, whatever religion, is expelled out of the land, your property values drop dramatically, right? You know, everyone knows that you got to get out and you have no other recourse. And so having to sell cheap and lose everything and lose your job, lose your profession, and have to travel who knows where, at what expense. And then every airline, you know, whatever, or train or bus service knows that you got to travel and knows you got to leave town, and they're going to charge you exorbitant rates as well. And so they had to leave at whatever means and off of an island, right, off of England, so whatever boat or ferries that they're able to take, and they have to start all over from scratch. And those who fled to Spain just a few years after this, 16 years after, or France rather, 16 years after this, France decided to do the same thing. They thought it was good enough for England, it's good enough for us, and so we were now expelled out of 2 different countries in a relatively short period of time and couldn't live in either one. So also that took place, both those events took place on Tishah B'Av. And again, I don't necessarily know if the King of England knew it was Tishah B'Av and said, well, let's do it on this day. I doubt he had that information at hand. And then the same with France. France did the same thing. They expelled us out of France on Tishah B'Av on this occasion that we're observing now. And so all these horrible events taking place on that very day. We jump another, I think, about 200 years to 1492, and then Spain did the same exact thing under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, that we were expelled, not allowed to own land, not allowed to live in Spain at all at that time. And so Europe has not been good to us long before the Nazis came along. The Nazis were really just reaping the whirlwind that had been sowed all those years prior in building up to it. And these 3 countries in particular all profess to be Christian countries. The Church of England and Spain and France, and expelling us and not allowing us to live there at all. So horrible history, and interesting, all of those things again taking place, and I doubt King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella knew it was Tishah B'Av when they decreed it. But now they're known in history in 1492 for something else. What else took place in 1492 by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand? Columbus, that's when Columbus, and I forget if it's the day before or the day after Tishah B'Av when they sailed forth. And that, I don't think, was a coincidence either. I believe God's providence, while Europe was being closed off because of the coldness of their hearts, God was opening a new land. And this is prophesied in the book of Revelation, and we'll look at that when we get to the book of Revelation on that event taking place. But God was opening a new land of freedom, a new land of worship, and a new land of free rights for all and equal rights for all. And so it's very interesting, the correlation of the timing of God having Columbus and discovered, as far as the Europeans were concerned, again, it was already here, but for a land for people to come and flee to. And so there are many other horrible events that took place on Tishah B'Av. I mean, it's not hard. When you look at all the horrible events that's taken place in the Jewish people over the years, I mean, you basically just throw a dart. You know, you pick a date and throw a dart, you'll hit something. As one person said, you know, so horrible things happen on Tishah B'Av, and when it happens on other days, it's just kind of bonus, you know, so we just get bonus horrible days on the other days. But so there are many other things, but these are some of the ones that I think were very significant. Getting expelled out of a whole country is pretty significant. The First Crusade starting, and again, certainly the first 2 destructions of the temple. Now, of course, if anyone was to do something on Tishah B'Av today, some nation or some country attack Israel or do something, they would know. I mean, now it's known enough that what Tishah B'Av or what this date and significance of. So that would be a planned thing, I think, at this point. And so this is one of the reasons. These are the reasons it's commemorated. And now I want to focus this year, again, so it's a fast day, and still remember it as a fast day. It's not yet, even though we have the nation of Israel, Still, it's not fully to this time of, as God prophesied, a day of joyful festivities and rejoicing and gladness. And so we're still remembering and still waiting for God's eternal plan to be worked out. So for this year, for this occasion, I want to specifically focus on the destruction of the temple that took place in 70 CE under the Romans and Titus coming in. And this painting is depicting the atrocities being thrown from the altar, and you see the menorah being carried off there, and soldiers just slaying and killing Jewish people. And so the slaughters that took place in 70 AD. But the interesting thing about the 70 AD prophecy, like the time when the temple was destroyed by Babylon, they were prophesied in advance. Babylonian prophecy was prophesied by Jeremiah and others, but the 70 AD prophecy was prophesied in detail by Yeshua. And so I want to look at those accounts. I want to look at what he had to say, and the fulfillment of it, as we look historically, Jewish writers, Josephus writing about it, really amazing, the details that are depicted in the prophecy. So in Matthew chapter 24, verse 2, starts, Yeshua said, he's coming over the Mount of Olives, he's looking down on Jerusalem, and he's looking over at the temple, and he says to his disciples, "Do you not see all these buildings of the temple?" Right? And so the whole temple complex there with the marble walls, and maybe it was sunrise, and the sun shining on it and reflecting off it, no doubt a glorious sight, and he draws their attention to it and says, "See all these buildings, see this beautiful temple that we have. Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." That is a pretty amazing prophecy. Again, he's saying, you see that temple? You see its big bulwarks? You see it's high up on this area, and it's got this fortress there protecting it. But it's going to come to pass that not one stone of that temple is going to remain upon another. And not only are they going to get knocked over, they're going to get thrown down. And detailed exactly as it's written, that's exactly what happened. And you see John and Laurie standing there next to some stones. Those are the actual walls of the temple itself. Now the wall behind them there, that's the western wall. And the western wall goes up, I don't know, 70, 80 feet, I don't know how tall it is, pretty high. And so the walls of the temple were knocked down, and we'll describe how and why they were knocked down, but they were knocked down. But not only were they knocked down, they were dragged to the edge of the Temple Mount and then thrown down exactly as was prophesied. They would be thrown down, landing again 80 or so feet down, crushing the pavement below it. And some areas where they've moved some of these stones, and you can see the size of these stones, right? So it wasn't just, well, let's just push it over. It took a lot of effort to drag it to the edge of the Temple Mount, and the temple was probably in the middle of it, and so to drag it to the end and cast it over, that took a lot of effort and purpose in doing so. And the reason they did so was because God prophesied that it was going to do so. Or God prophesied do it because he knew they were going to do it one way or the other. But it's thrown down and cast down. In some of the areas where they've moved the rocks, you see the pavement is just collapsed from the weight and the pressure of the stones coming down upon it. And so again, amazing prophecy. That's just the beginning of the details that God foresaw and predicted that the temple would be destroyed. The disciples asked, "When will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" All right, so they're asking here like 2, maybe even 3 questions, depending how you dissect it. But there, in their mind, it's all just one question. When is that going to happen? The temple's going to be destroyed? The stones are going to be cast down? That's got to be the end of the world. If that's going to happen, it's all over. And so they just ask us one question. When will those things be? When's the temple going to be destroyed? And when will the signs of your coming be? That's kind of the second step. And then what will be the end of the age? And again, they're seeing it as one thing, but it really was, in a sense, 3 things, as we see. So Yeshua answers them, and he answers with one answer, but a kind of a dual or even a triple prophecy describing 3 specific different events. That the temple's going to be destroyed, the signs of his coming, and the end of the world as we know it. All encapsulated in the rest of this prophecy. And again, we've seen the accuracy thus far, and thus the accuracy will continue throughout it. So Yeshua said, "Take heed that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many. There will be wars and rumors of wars. Be not troubled. All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Nation will rise against nation. There'll be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." So he's predicting there's going to be lots of wars. There's going to be lots of rumors of wars. There's going to be lots of famines and earthquakes and horrible things. But that's not the end. And down through the ages, every time there's a war, it seems like, well, this is the end. And I'm sure going through World War II, for those in the midst of it, it would seem like this is the end of the world. But it wasn't. In World War I and many other atrocities that have taken place in this earth, it would seem like this is the end of the world. And some calamities, earthquakes, and things that have taken place. But he says those are not signs. Those are just events that are going to happen. That's just the beginning of sorrows. Those things are going to come and they're going to pass and you're going to continue on. And so while people will jump at every blood moon or whatever and think this is it, those are not it. That's not the signs. It's going to give us the specific signs. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many, and because of lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. So here in just 3 verses, he takes us the entire span of the last 2,000 years. He takes us from you're going to be delivered to tribulation and killed, all the way to he that endures to the end shall be saved. So again, answering those 3 questions, all in one sentence, but really describing the events that were going to take place. And we see it, right? They were delivered to tribulation. And he mentions tribulation 3 times in these in this one chapter. And I believe it depicts 3 different tribulations. So he's mentioning the first tribulation, and they certainly went through a massive tribulation. Many were killed, many were slaughtered. Again, the destruction of the temple, about 30 or so years after the prophecy was given. And as we just saw in some of the pictures, they were slaughtered, they were killed, there was a tribulation. You'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. If that's not an apt description of the UN, I don't know what is, right? And down through the ages, we just saw England expelling us, and Spain expelling us, and France expelling us, hated by all nations for my name's sake. I mean, there are countries now like Malaysia and some of these places, they just absolutely hate the Jews, and there's no Jews ever lived there. No, they never met a Jew, but they hate the Jews. The Jews are the problem of the world, according to them. And so there's a lot of these nations, and again, the UN has voted, all the nations have voted more condemnations against the tiny little country of Israel that has a population like smaller than some cities here in the United States, smaller than many of the states here in the United States, almost all the states in the United States. The small little country of Israel has received more condemnations from the UN than all the other countries of the world combined. More than North Korea, more than Syria, who chemical bombs their people, more than, again, Venezuela, lots of these horrible, horrible countries that kill, slaughter, and imprison and suppress and oppress their people. More than all these countries combined. Israel is their attack over and over and over and over again. Hated by all nations for my name's sake. That's an amazing prophecy, I think, as well. Especially when at that time, I mean, such a small nation and not having, travel like we have today and internet and communication like we have today. How would all the nations of the earth even know? That's what he prophesies. A time is going to come. You're going to be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And so if we fall into that category and you're hated, well, hey, that's okay. That's what God prophesied, and And that's how it is. And nothing new under the sun. And again, we've seen that all through the Dark Ages and encompassing all the way to our day. And then many will be offended and will betray one another and will hate one another. And we've seen that over the ages too. They're infighting and hating each other. False prophets will rise, deceive many. And of course, it's false, and it must be true as well. But false prophets will deceive many. And lawlessness will abound. And we see that. We see that in religious circles where God's law is just trampled underfoot. God's law is taught as being nullified and void and not necessary anymore. Lawlessness. A religion without law. Lawlessness. Less law. Doing away with the law. And also in society. Outside of religious circles, we're seeing a trampling on laws and respect for the laws of this country and other countries. That we don't need of laws anymore, and less laws, and less restrictions and protections. Everyone doing what seems right in their own eyes, and a disrespect for law keeping and for law enforcement. And so lawlessness is abounding, and atrocities are taking place. And the love of many growing cold. We hear it on the news every day if you listen to it. Just this week I heard of a boy killing his grandfather with an axe. The love of many growing cold. People killing their mothers who nursed them and raised them and bore them and carried them and changed their diapers. Love of many growing cold. People with mass murders, cold hearts, not caring who they kill, not caring how it affects these people, not caring how it affects their families, not caring who they hurt. It's going on a rampage. People they don't even know. Love of many growing cold. Absolute craziness going on. Exactly as was prophesied, so it has come to pass. But he who endures to the end. If it takes endurance, that means we're going to go through these tribulations. But God promises he will give us the ability to endure, and he certainly has. I mean, it's miraculous that we're still here. I mean, that's a miracle in itself. He promises that we will endure to the end, and we have endured to the end. It's an absolute amazing miracle, being without a country for the majority of the 2,000 years, being scattered and expelled and expelled and expelled in crusades and pogroms to eliminate us, and we're still here. It's an absolute miracle of God, but that's what he prophesied. Enduring to the end. And I believe we're very close to the end, and we've made it thus far, and so I believe he's going to take us all the way to the end, but it'll take patient endurance on the part of God's people. Trusting in him, having faith in him, relying on him, and not being surprised when trials and tribulations take place against us. Because it takes endurance to the very end. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. And again, that's amazing too. The Bible is being spread in all nations of the world. The Bible, God's truth, is going forth around the world. And who could possibly think back 2,000 years ago that would even be possible? Be able to take it to nations that weren't even known then. Around the world, translated into all these languages. Mass-produced, able to put on a small little phone or even smaller, and audio verse and with solar recorders to be able to be heard by people who can't even read. Absolutely amazing. The gospel is going around the world. But there's still many areas it hasn't reached. God's word still needs to go further. And sometimes it hasn't even reached our neighbor next door to us. But this is the prophecy. This is it. This is what is waiting on. This is what we're waiting on to go home. This is it. Don't be looking to other nations. Don't be looking to wars and rumors of wars. Don't think the next war is going to be it, or the next blood moon or some other crazy thing is going to be it, or some earthquake or some calamity or some famine or some stock market crash. This is the prophecy. This is it. This is what God is waiting on for us to take, by his power, by his grace, to take his word to the world, to be a light to the nations that God has called us to be, for his light to shine forth. And so if we want to go home, we want to see our loved ones that have passed before us, we want to be in heaven, we want to end this earth as it is and move into the new heavens and new earth, this is the way to get there. This is the only way. When this gospel is preached in all the world, then the end shall come. And of course, as we do that, we'll need endurance because tribulation and trials will come by those who don't want to hear it and those who reject it. But it goes hand in hand. But nonetheless, this is what needs to take place. This is what God's waiting on. This is what we need God's Spirit for. We need God's power to remove our fears and to move us forward by his power to share. And it starts here in this city. It starts in this area. It starts in our neighborhoods. It starts with those who we work with. It starts with those in our family. It starts among the people we come in contact with. And then God can use us in other ways as well. You know, again, with the internet, we can post things and blog things and all other ways to get the message out there. And today in this country, God's bringing people from other nations here. Whether they're crawling under a fence or however they're coming, and it might be horrible and all like that, whatever your political views on that. But nonetheless, it's an opportunity for us to share the gospel with them. And then they may be expelled and may be sent back, and they can take the gospel with them if that's the case. But we need to look for opportunities to share with all that we come in contact with. That's what God's called us to. That's needs to be our focus. This is the command. This is the prophecy. This is the promise. This is what God's waiting on. Nothing else, really. Everything else, and only a few other things, will fall into place as this takes place. Therefore, so he took us all the way from their time to the end, enduring to the end, and the gospel being preached, and then he kind of goes through it again. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. Let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. So he's again talking specifically to their day. Now when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. So again, obviously it hadn't happened already. It wasn't Antiochus Epiphanes or anything else. It hadn't yet happened in his day when he's making this prophecy. But it does take place. And we'll see that here in a minute. Soon after he prophesies. And we've been talking that in the studies of Daniel. And if you've missed that, go to shlomadventure.com and you can watch the sermons on Daniel that we've done. When you see that standing in the holy place, standing in God's temple, flee to the mountains. Flee to Judea. And Josephus, a Jewish historian, wrote regarding the destruction of the temple. He said, those who believed these words saw the events taking place and they fled. What had happened was Rome had come with their legions and in 70 AD and attacked Jerusalem. They had surrounded Jerusalem and were laying siege to it. And then all of a sudden, for seemingly no reason, they retreated. And again, as Josephus wrote, those who believed these words, this prophecy, saw that as an opportunity, saw that they had come in and the abomination of desolation was taking place. And so they saw this as their opportunity and they fled. And they fled to the mountains of Judea. And that none of them were killed. But the Jewish soldiers saw the Roman soldiers retreating, and they saw that as their opportunity to go and attack them from behind. And that's what they did. They went and attacked them and killed many of them and won a battle that way. But of course, some escaped and made it back to Rome, and they told Rome, who was not happy about that at all, and they sent in even more and stronger legions to come in under Titus and broke through the walls, came into Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And again, here's another picture you see of the menorah being carried out. And it is written that Titus told them, don't destroy the temple. But one of the soldiers in fighting, he had a firebrand and he shot the arrow and it went into the temple, and it stuck into the cedar walls and set the whole thing ablaze inside. And so being like in an oven inside, it just got so hot that the metal that was in the gold that was inside, the gold plattings, the gold walls, and the gold doors began to melt and seep down into the walls, and they were knocking down the walls of the temple to get whatever gold they could get out of there. And thus the stones were knocked down and then eventually dragged to the edge and thrown down, as we already read. Now, Titus, in coming back to Rome, a monument called Titus's Archway was erected commemorating the destruction of Jerusalem and the victory over the Jews, again, that took place in 70 AD. And you can see the height of it, right? You see a person standing there in front of it. So, again, that's pretty high. Again, I'm not good with math. I don't know, that's at least 70, 80 or more feet, right? So, a very tall, high archway. He may march his army through there, parading through there. When we go inside this archway, on the inside is a depiction of the victory. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more on it. And you can see the menorah. You can see the Jewish slaves carrying the menorah to Rome. And for all we know, it's still there. Maybe hidden in some vault somewhere underneath some building or something. But that's where it ended up. They even say it ended up there. They're even depicting it ending up there. And you can see some of the other furniture from the temple being brought there. But there's three other things that I want to point out in this picture, or this relief. To the top left, you see this banner. Then right in the middle next to the menorah, there's another one. And then a third one on the right-hand side. And so those were the banners of each of the legions. And on it, they'd have their symbol, they'd have their logo, which basically was their gods that they worshipped, right? So they would bring those in, they would pray to those and claim the victory because they gave them the victory. So they're carrying that back and they put it in the relief showing that these are our gods that gave us the victory over these other gods, right? That's why they're putting the furniture there. They're not just showing, oh, look at the wealth of this furniture that we got, or look at how pretty this menorah is. They saw that as the gods of Israel, right? And so we gain victory, our gods beat their gods. And so here's our gods carrying their gods captive, their idols captive. And so that's the abomination of desolation, these idols of Rome being brought in to the temple among the people of God. And again, the believers recognized that, saw that, and fled. Similarly, in these last days, an abomination of desolation is taking place as the errors of Rome continue to creep in among God's people. Verse 19, woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath day. Well, Tishah B'Av, they told them, pray that it's not in the winter. Well, Tishah B'Av is in the summer, right? And so God answered that prayer. He told them to pray that. They obviously prayed that, and God answered that prayer. The destruction was not because, again, they had to flee to the mountains, and so fleeing in the winter, no doubt, with the rainy season would have been much harder. And so, fortunately, God answered that prayer for those who heeded the prophecy and fled. And that it would not be on the Sabbath day. So obviously he was expecting the Sabbath day to continue to be kept even long after he prophesied this, that to keep the Sabbath, right? To pray that you're not having to flee on the Sabbath day. That's certainly a good validation for the Sabbath, that the lawlessness, that the law has not been done away with, that the Sabbath is still important and still something that we should be praying, that we don't have to flee or work or on. And certainly it would be horrible, as prophesied, a horrible time for those with young children going through that tribulation and the destruction that Rome brought upon Israel at that time. Verse 21, then there would be a great tribulation. So we already read a tribulation. Now it says a great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. And so again, now I think he's taken us all the way to the end, and I believe this great tribulation is at the very end. There'll be a great tribulation such as not been seen. So as the Holocaust was horrible enough, worse than that, if we can possibly fathom such a thing. Worse than anything and all things combined, such as never been seen. But again, promising that God will shorten those days, because if he did not, no flesh would be saved. That's an amazing thing to state back 2,000 years ago. And no flesh would be saved? How could they possibly kill all flesh back in that day? I mean, even if you got some kind of war that everyone, until there's only one left, at least one would be standing, right? But today, it's very plausible. It's very easy for a nuclear conflict to take place between all the nations that have nuclear weapons and those that are attempting to get them or have chemical weapons. And there's a chemical warfare around the world. We could easily destroy this planet several times over and no flesh would survive. I think that's pretty amazing to make a bold statement like that 2,000 years ago, and for us to be living in the age when it actually can happen. Hasn't been able to happen until only maybe, about 50 years ago or so, that we could possibly do what is being prophesied here. And we're living in that time. Thus again, I believe we're right near the very end. But God promises us he will cut it short. It's not going to come to that. It's not going to come to a total, might be nuclear weapons use, but we're not going to come to a point of a total, because God's going to stop it beforehand. He is going to shorten those days. It's going to be a great tribulation. Horrible, horrible time. And if I've missed the verse where it says we get poofed out of here first, where we run away first, I haven't seen it yet. But he who endures to the end, God will see us through, just like in Goshen in Egypt. Right? The 10 plagues came while we were still in Egypt. The Red Sea did not part until after, but God protected us through that time. And God will protect us down to the end. Not that there won't be martyrs, not that there won't be death, not that some won't suffer. But as a whole, God will see us through to the end. He's seen us this far. He's not going to stop now. But for the elect's sake, he will shorten that calamity so that it will not affect all flesh. That he will deliver us. He will save us. He will come through. And again, we can look at the Holocaust and say, where was God? Well, we did survive. Yes, millions died. Horrendous deaths. But he has sustained a remnant down through the ages. And more calamities, other calamities have happened, and more will happen. But he will see a remnant through to the end. And for those of us that die along the way, well, death is not necessarily the end. As we trust in the Lord, and trust and have peace in him. Verse 23, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah or there, don't believe it. False messiahs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. I have told you beforehand. If they say, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. Right? So if there's some charismatic healer and deliverer and even a raiser of the dead, I don't care what he does or what he says, could be quoting the Bible left and right. He's not it. Believe it not. Go not out. Don't even turn it on and watch it on the TV or internet or whatever. It's false deception. And there have been some already, but nothing like is being prophesied here. There have been the Waco wackos and Jim Joneses and all other kinds of things. But there's going to be a worldwide one that's going to deceive the vast majority. And again, I'll be able to do all kinds of things. Great signs and wonders to deceive many. I don't know what kind of great signs, but again, maybe bring peace to nations and harmony and unity, somewhat unity. Maybe heal diseases. Step in as a peacemaker. But under a guise of deception. And will deceive many. Do not believe it. We have a specific sign, and we know which one is the right and which is the wrong. We will see him in the clouds, not here on earth. He's walking on this earth in a secret place, in a desert place, in a mountainous place, anywhere. In Jerusalem, in New York City, anywhere. Believe it not. Will not touch the ground here. As lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. Like lightning, from the east to the west, like lightning. Not showing up on a TV screen. Like lightning, all the world, every eye shall see him. Like lightning, and lightning is accompanied with thunder, right? Every ear will hear, every eye will see. Be bright and in the skies. Not here on earth, not walking around here. And as it says, so shall it be the coming of the Son of Man be. Messiah will come with, again, brightness on the clouds and brightness in the sky, like lightning, rapidly coming for his deliverance to shorten the tribulation. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles or vultures will be gathered. Why does he put that in there? What does that have to do with him coming like lightning? Because when he comes, the wicked are destroyed with the brightness of his coming. And thus there's carcasses. And where there's carcasses, the vultures will eat the carcasses. And this is described in Revelation as well. The great supper of the birds, where they will eat the carcasses of the wicked that will be destroyed. God will cut it short in righteousness. How does he cut it short in righteousness? He cuts it short in righteousness by his appearing on this earth and destroying the wicked. That's what's being described here. There will be their carcasses, and the birds will gather and eat their carcasses. Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, here's a third tribulation. I think he's now going back because he's taking us all the way to the end, like lightning coming. So he's taking us all the way to the end, the wicked dying, and now he reverts back again and takes us through. After the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon shall give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. We've seen some of these events already take place, if not all of them. I believe they'll be repeated again in a concise form. We'll look at that a little bit in Daniel some more. But immediately after the tribulations, events in the skies will take place. And the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. And all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So we can't miss the false from the true. Very clear, coming on the clouds. Again, not being interviewed by Fox or CNN or whatever. Coming on the clouds with all his power and all his glory. And the wicked will mourn when they see it. For they know that their destruction is there. He will come with his deliverance, and every eye will see him. Every ear will hear him come. He'll come on the clouds with all the angels with him. He will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So he comes like lightning, he comes on the clouds, he comes with power and glory. Not a human Messiah, coming in all of his glory, coming in all of his power, coming to this earth, and sending forth his angels to gather the elect, those that have endured to the end, those who've been seen through the tribulation, those who have trusted in the Lord, those who have loved truth and peace, those who have waited patiently for him, those whom he has kept by his power. They will see him coming, and he will gather his angels, and they will gather the elect. And the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the shofar of God. And the dead in Messiah will be raised first, and we which are alive and remain will be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air. He's coming in the air, and we meet him in the air. He takes us to heaven to meet him in the air. He comes, and that's how he delivers us. His deliverance, he cuts it short. He destroys the wicked, and he takes us to heaven. He takes his wheat to his barn, and he takes the weeds, and he burns them up. He destroys them simultaneously. He takes his sheep to his fold, he destroys the wicked at his coming. Simultaneously, just as described here. Enduring to the end, and at the very end, he works his deliverance. And the earth is burned up. It will melt with fervent heat, destroyed once with a flood, destroyed the second time with fire. As Peter describes, the elements will melt with fervent heat, and the earth thereof will be burned up, leaving neither root nor branch. Everything will be destroyed. Everything will be melted. Everything will be turned to ashes on the face of this earth. And that's the only thing he can do if he's going to create a new heavens and new earth, as described several places in the Bible. In order to have a new, he's got to get rid of the old. And he does it all simultaneously as he comes. He takes us to heaven and he refashions this earth, destroys the wicked, destroys the earth, in order to make a new heavens and a new earth, wherein will dwell righteousness forever and ever. And it's in the new heavens and the new earth where will come to pass the fulfillment of the prophecy we read in the beginning in Zechariah, where the fast of the 5th month and the 4th month and the 7th month and the 10th month will become days of gladness and of joyful festivity and happiness and rejoicing to those who love truth and who love peace. And that's what he's called us to love his truth, to love his peace, to have his peace in our hearts and minds, and to share peace with others, to share love with others, to minister to others, to care for them, and to share God's word with them. To forgive those who've hurt us, to forgive the King Edwards and the King Ferdinands and the Crusaders, to forgive those who've despitefully used us and harmed us. And on our personal levels as well, for those who've despitefully used us and all the nations of the earth who hate us, by God's grace to forgive and to love and to rise above and to not hate back. And so as we prepare to close and get ready for these end-time events to take place, because time is running out, there's not much time left. God's called us to take this gospel to the world and to be ready and to have our hearts ready. And the way to be able to endure to the end is to endure the little trials and tribulations that we go through each and every day. He has seen us through the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. He's seen us through the dark ages, and he's seeing us through today, and he will see us through to the end. Trust him now in whatever you're going through. And so as we prepare to pray, if you're going through something specific in your life right now, maybe it's some tribulation to you. Maybe it's not worldwide or nationwide, or maybe it's just in your life. Maybe it's just against you, or maybe just against your family, or whatever you're going through. I encourage you to surrender it to God, trust in him, ask for his endurance, ask for his patience. If someone has hurt you, ask for God to give you the ability to forgive. If it's a result of your own sins and own mistakes, to ask God to give you the gift of repentance and confession so that you can receive forgiveness and cleansing. And so in a moment, if that applies to you, I invite you to pray regarding that. Secondly, if God has called you to share his word with someone, maybe further than you already are, maybe in more ways than you already are, if God's impressing your mind and heart, maybe with a specific person, or maybe some other type of a thing, maybe in some other way that you haven't yet used, maybe to put some cards in your purse or in your wallet and to share them with people at the supermarket when you check out or wherever you go, or to share the next time you talk with your neighbor, or again, in some way with your internet circles. of influence. Maybe God's impressing your mind and heart in some other way. He's calling you to minister. In a moment when we pray, you can ask God to give you His Spirit, to empower you, and to go before you to prepare the hearts and the minds and the conversations and the place and the time. Thirdly, if you need God's endurance to endure to the end, if you're fearful, worried, and concerned about the events that are going to take place on this earth, surrender all those fears to the Lord and trust in Him. He's been consistent. He's been truthful. He's been accurate. He will see us through to the end. Trust in Him. Rest in Him. Have your peace in Him. Surrender any anxiety, any worries, any cares. He loves you with an everlasting love. And He cares for you. So if any of those areas apply to you, or maybe some other area that God's speaking to your heart or mind about, then let's pray together and let God do His work. Our Lord and our God, ruler of the universe, we praise your name and we thank you, Lord, that you've been consistent down through the ages. And although the world has been consistent in their hatred of you and of us, you have been faithful. And so, Lord, we want to trust in you and we want your peace. We want to love truth. We want to love peace. Give us your mind. Give us your heart. Sustain us. Hold us up. Hold us fast. Walk with us. Carry us. Take us through our trials and tribulations here on this earth, individually and corporately. Thank you for laying it out for us so that we can see the times that we're living in and see your miraculous hand in our past. And so walk us through our future. In Yeshua's holy name, amen.